Hello. Today we're going to see how roots and imaginary numbers, where their role is in solving equations. When we're solving equations. So what you're looking at here is 4 different equations. They're all quadratic equations. You can see each, if you were to think of each one of these as an expression, the degree would be 2. And in each one of these, there's only an x squared term and no x term. So that's a sign that you can use this method of taking the square root, and you don't have to set equal to 0 and factor. So this is something we've done before. I'm going to look at example 1, and just remember that you can isolate x squared. So to do that, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. Actually, let me zoom in here. So I can add, ooh, that's a highlighter. Undo. Okay, so I can add 5 to both sides. And get that 2x squared is equal to 144. Eventually I'll take the square root, but before I do that, I just want to isolate x squared, so I'm going to divide by 2 and get x squared equals 72. Now I want just what x equals. I don't want what x squared equals. So I want to think, okay, what to the second power will give me 72? Now 72 is not a perfect square, so this is actually difficult to do in your head, but that's okay, we have algebra. We know that to get rid of squaring something, to undo that, we can apply the inverse to both sides, take the square root. The square root of x squared, we know is just x, and the square root of 72, well, the square root of 72 is 36, and 2 is 6 root 2. The thing is, though, I know that if I were to square negative 6 root 2, that would give me 72, if I were to square that, as well as positive 6 root 2, if I were to square that, that would give me 72. Now that's the reason why when I am solving an equation by taking the square root, I need to remember to say that it's plus or minus 6 root 2. That's my answer. Both of those numbers will solve this equation. So this equation has 2 answers. It happens to be 2 real, although irrational. These aren't rational numbers. The square root of 2 goes on and on forever, just like the number pi. So it has 2 real answers. Now let's look at one that doesn't. So we're going to look at example 2. Now notice there's only a slight change. All that's different between these two is this negative. So it's going to end up being set up the same way, where I'm going to add 5. Oh, I fell for that trick again. So I'm going to add 5. And now I have negative 2x squared equals 144, divide by negative 2, and I have x squared equals negative 72. Now I know no real number squared is going to give me a negative, but I do know that imaginary numbers squared give me negatives. Remember how I squared is negative 1? So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the square root of both sides and get that x is equal to, and I'm still going to have plus or minus. Because once again, the positive version and the negative version are going to work. So that still applies here. Whatever the square root of negative 72 is. And we practice simplifying that. I know that instead of saying the square root of negative 1, I'm going to say that that's I. 72 is again 36 and 2. So for my final answer, I'm going to say plus or minus 6i. Oh, there should be a root there. Root 2. Nice. Okay, so let's compare these two. Pretty similar answers. They both have a plus or minus. So they both have that plus or minus. That's going to be true for any quadratic that you solve using this method. And because this was the square root of negative 72, I have the I. This one is just a real number. I don't. So pretty similar stuff, just that if it's x squared equals a negative, we don't write no real solution because we can actually figure out what the imaginary solution is. Okay, let's do two more for good measure. All right, example 3. X squared plus 49 equals 0. Not too bad. Feeling good about this one. Let's subtract 49 from both sides. So x squared equals a negative 49. That's a sign, literally this sign, this negative sign is a sign that we're going to have an imaginary answer. So I take the square root of both sides. And I have that x is equal to whatever plus or minus the square root of negative 49 is. I'm smart enough to know that it's not like this negative and this negative cancel or anything. Right, this is plus or minus I square root 49, which is a perfect square. So plus or minus I times 7. Now that might not look weird to you right now, but it looks weird to me because I know I like to put the plus or minus first, the number second, and then the I. Because we kind of put the I in the same position as we would in x, as if the 7 is like a coefficient. And I just want to show you that I'm not lying. I'm going to check it. So first let me check that 7i is a solution. So I should be able to square 7i and add 49, and it should equal 0, right? I'm just plugging in what I think the answer is here. So 7i squared is 49, and then I squared plus 49. Does that equal 0? Oh, look at this. I got 49 times a negative 1. It's going to work because negative 49 plus 49 is 0. Awesome. See, I wasn't lying. Now let's check the negative 1. You're like, all right, maybe that one worked, but maybe not the other one. Okay, so I'm going to take that and square it. And we're going to get the same thing because I'm squaring a negative 7 and I get 49, positive 49. That I is still getting squared, and it looks just like the last one. And I get 0 equals 0. They both work. I hope you didn't doubt me. Okay, so they both work. That's the answer. Everybody's happy. Okay. Let's do the last one. Now, the last one I wanted to do, just so you don't get scared when you see 2x squareds, that's okay. We're just going to do a little combining like terms first. I'm not going to like start by taking the square root because my goal is to get x squared on its own. Like x squared equals blank. That's the goal. And I can do that by subtracting x squared from both sides. I can do 5x squared minus 1x squared. It's like combining like terms. And you get 4x squared. Now I'll divide both sides by 4 and get that x squared equals negative 20. I'll take the square root of both sides and get that x equals plus or minus whatever the square root of negative 20 is. Okay, no problem. I know that it's I because of this negative. And then the square root of 20 is 4 and 5. Square root of 4 times square root of 5. So plus or minus 2i root 5. That root 4 is the 2. This root 5 stayed, and then that I is hanging out there. So there you have it. That is solving equations using the square root method. See ya.